welcome everybody. My name is Dan Martin. I am the Vice President of ConnectSMART, and today we have with us Shane Swanson, who is the Chief Operating Officer of CharTec and ARRC Technologies. And what we're going to be doing today, if I have keyboard control, is we're going to be going through a little bit of the ARRC Technology story and how some of their best practices they've been developing, how that has really made a difference in their business, what's made them so successful. We're going to be talking about the top 5 metrics for any MSP. Some of you may have read the white paper we recently put out on that. We're going to kind of dig into that a little bit deeper and go into what ConnectSMART is. So as I've already introduced myself, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Shane. He really is a Chief Operating Officer. He is the expert at operations, has done a phenomenal job at really running the whole operations there for CharTec and for ARRC, and has become really the master of automation. And he also makes a mean peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you'll hear a little bit more about that if you come to one of the operations academies, which they put on regularly. There's lots of training that CharTec does for a lot of people that they work with. And without any further ado, Shane, let me go ahead and turn it over to you. And if you would, tell us about ARRC.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you having me on the webinar today. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Yeah, I mean, we've been with ConnectSMART for a really long time. I think, what's it been, 8, 9 years now, Dan, something like
Right.
that. And we started back with, shortly after we went live with ConnectWise. I was really excited about all the different features within ConnectWise back in the day. And one of the things I loved the most was the whole workflow and being able to send email notifications out. And so I created this very intense workflow process for SLA management, and thought, I'm going to get this thing all figured out. I'm going to notify these guys when they're getting close to missing their SLA. And next thing I know, I implement this whole thing, spent quite a minute, several hours doing this. Next thing I know is I'm going over and meeting with the guys, and I'm like, guys, what's going on? Why are we missing our SLAs? I've been notifying you guys. And one of my senior engineers looked up at me and he's all, would you rather I pay attention to tickets or this 1,000 email I just got in the last 4 hours? So quickly I realized I had a bigger issue. Shortly after that I learned about Dan and the ConnectSMART tool. And after we implemented the whole ConnectWise, or the ConnectSMART piece, had that up on the screens, on the dashboards all throughout our office. And within 2 weeks I went over, and it was like a completely different team over there. I'd go over there, I'd talk to them, hey guys, what's going on with this, what's going on with that? And within the 2 weeks after implementing this, I wouldn't even have to ask any questions. I'd walk over there, immediately one of them would stand up, oh, this is what's going on with this happened here, this is why this gadget's off. And it was a night and day difference. It was the accountability and them holding themselves accountable was exactly what we were looking for. And as we've evolved, we've looked at all the different dashboards, all the different pieces of ConnectSMART, and tried to take as good of advantage as we possibly can. I'm really big in the metrics and the reporting system, because if you can't get the visualization, if you can't read into the system and know all the financial details, all the operational details, how do you know what direction and what changes to make within your business? So giving you the flexibility and the visualization to be able to customize this and to get the data out of it that you want is crucial for any business. We can all agree that ConnectWise, LabTech, they're all great systems, but being able to have a centralized reporting and monitoring system as far as a dashboard view, that definitely helps and gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of options. And for me, visualization, graphs, seeing little pie charts, things like this, they make all the difference in the world for me, because at a quick glance I can see, hold on, I got red, there's a problem there. And so I want to drill into that and get more information. And we'll get into a little bit more about that, but that's that whole manage by exception piece that Dan's taught me so much about.
Great. And Shane, you want to tell a little bit about CharTec and ARRC and how that works together? A bit about the company itself?
Yeah, those of you guys who aren't familiar, ARRC Technology is a local MSP here in Bakersfield, California. We've been in business for almost 20 years now, and or a little over 20 years actually. And we're just like all the other MSPs out there, servicing our local clients and doing a little bit of break fix, but mostly managed services. The CharTec side is more of kind of your business consultant. We do a lot of training, a lot of educational type programs. We do different labs where we do hands-on, consulting with small groups of people. We've got different membership levels that include some of these benefits and things like that. But CharTec is really that business consultant, the one that's going to help take a lot of what we've learned at ARRC and being successful at ARRC and translating that over into how we can help you guys grow your businesses and be successful in doing that. And obviously the metrics and the dashboards and all the things we've learned all translate directly over to how we help you guys grow your business through that program.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about working with both ARRC and CharTec is it's not just about a picture, it's not just about a number, but it's really about making it effective, actually doing something with it. And that's one of the things I've seen a lot. We've had a lot of customers who've gotten ConnectSMART and they said, well, what should we monitor? And they put a bunch of stuff up on the screen, but they don't use it to change their business. And that really is the key, is that as you really implement and you really execute on it and you tie that into your business, that's where it starts to make a difference. So let's take a quick look at what we put out as those 5 most critical MSP metrics. And we're going to dig into each one of these a little bit in detail. And the first one that we want to talk about is the agreement profitability. If you're an MSP, agreement profitability is really the #1 issue that we're facing today as we're running our businesses. So Shane, what would you like to talk about on agreement profitability? How does this work for you guys?
Well, as we know, Dan, if we're not profitable in our agreements, why are we in business? So we got to know, what agreements are most profitable, which ones are not profitable, and what do we have to do to change those things? And just because an agreement's not profitable doesn't mean we initially need to, fire that client or release them back to the industry, as we like to say it. A lot of times it's because we didn't onboard them correctly, or maybe we didn't sell them on the right agreement, looking back a year into the system. Well, their expectations are here, and we only provided services and value for this. We've actually had success in sometimes increasing a customer's monthly and having them be happier than when they were paying us a lesser amount, because they were getting the value, they were getting the service that they were expecting with the increased monthly and the new agreement structure. So that being said, how do we determine what agreements are profitable and which ones aren't? Well, at quick glance, what I recommend to everybody is, look, if you don't have all of your costs associated with your agreement, if you're not associating all the labor, all that fun stuff, we at least need to do one thing. We need to look at effective rate. And effective rate is essentially, go take what your monthly is, go take the number of hours that you've spent working on that agreement, and that's going to give you your effective rate. Essentially, that breaks down to, what is that hourly rate that you would be charging if this customer was on a break-fix agreement? Now, I don't know about you, Dan, but if I had a client that was, say $50 an hour, and that included hardware or BDR, for example, and maybe a little bit of other equipment, that's not somebody I probably want to keep on board. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
So, so if you can't do anything else, we at least want to look at effective rate, because at a quick glance, it can give you a general understanding of which agreements are most likely profitable and which ones aren't. But don't use that as your only tool. That needs to be a very high-level tool that you use to get a quick glance. You're going to have to do a deeper dive, and you're going to have to look at labor-loaded gross margin. And labor-loaded gross margin is essentially going to give you that ultimate profitability mark. Wouldn't you agree, Dan?
Absolutely. It's funny. The first time this hit us, it really hit home for us, was with one of our customers that was a big name brand account, which we just had a very small firewall deal with them. We just handled their firewalls all over the place. And one of their main locations, it was a very well-known steak house, and every time there was a problem, it ended up that our most senior engineer kind of called dibs on being able to go out to work at this particular place. And so it was everything from, a minor firmware upgrade, replacing a firewall, replacing a patch cable. It really didn't matter. It always seemed to require an on-site, and it always happened to be our most expensive engineer. And we realized after a little while that it was because he got a free $75 steak for lunch every time and got to spend some time with all the folks there who were a lot of fun to be with. But if we looked at those and we looked at his cost, and we looked at how much it cost us for him to provide that service, if he spent 2 hours at the customer site, it cost us a lot more than 2 hours of an intern who could have simply dropped off a firewall and plugged it in. And that's where we saw such a huge disparity, to where it really started us looking at this difference between the effective rate. And if everybody's paid exactly the same amount, effective rate is great. And as Shane mentioned, it's better than not having anything at all. It at least gives you a baseline. But as you start to have those different structures, if you have a more expensive person doing work that a less expensive person can be doing, then you're really losing in the profitability. And if you only have 1 or 2 agreements, again, it's not going to be a big deal. But as you start to grow, that ends up being thousands and tens of thousands of dollars a month difference just in that small thing of managing that labor-loaded gross margin. So tell us a little bit more. I know, Shane, we have the bundling dilemma as well, and we'll probably hit labor-loaded gross margin a little bit more. And this has been a big problem or difficulty that people have had, and different ways to handle it. Some CharTec has done a really good job at kind of going the opposite, unbundling, and some people are still bundling. Can you explain that a little bit to us, Shane?
So whenever we sell a managed service agreement, we're including everything in it, right? So essentially we're bundling all these services, your antivirus, your backup, whatever other services you're including, spam filtering, all those things typically get included. And I don't know about you guys, but we don't typically share that as an a la carte pricing. So we include that as, hey, you're going to pay us $2,000 a month or $5,000 a month, whatever that monthly is, and all this stuff's going to be included. But in order for us to get our labor-loaded gross margin in true profitability agreement, we have to have those costs listed somewhere. Now, for a lot of people that aren't as advanced or as large an organization as we are, I recommend that if nothing else, you at least put in a cost associated with those particular products on your agreement itself. Maybe not have necessarily a revenue listed, but at least have a cost listed so you can have those. For us, we actually list a price and a cost associated with those. And then I have a SQL script on the back end that goes through and does what we consider an unbundling process. And basically what that does is it goes through and adds up all those items that are included as part of that bundle, and then just kind of deducts that from that top level. And the reason we do it that way and go with that in advance is because I want to look at it from a financial aspect. I want to be able to look at our income statement and be able to see what product lines are we making good money on, which ones aren't we, and really be able to break that apart and see how we're functioning both department-wise, but also, product-wise as well. And that's, ultimately, in order for you to get your labor-loaded gross margin, you have to do some variation of that. Wouldn't you agree, Dan?
Yeah, and for someone who may not be aware of the idea of the labor-loaded gross margin, really it's a great equalizer when you're giving you kind of that, what's that number that you're looking at for your, how profitable you are on an agreement. And what it's doing is it's taking all of your costs, including all of your labor, and then taking that as a percentage of your revenue. So where that becomes really important, if you're looking at, you're kind of stacking up all of your agreements, we have a gadget that shows us all of our agreements kind of in either ascending or descending view of their labor-loaded gross margin percentage. And we have a target that we're looking for in our hosted contracts, and this is on our MSP side of the business. On our hosted contracts, we want a particular labor-loaded gross margin percent. We want to see about 65% because we have a lot of hardware involved. And in our premise contracts, we want to see between 70 to 73% of labor-loaded gross margin. And the reason that's so important is not all agreements are the same. And so we find that if we're just looking this at the total revenue, then we have a couple of those whale contracts that are really, really large, and if you have a contract that's $70,000 plus a month, and then most of your other contracts are maybe $500 or $1,000 or $3,000 contracts, that big disparity causes managers and owners to make really bad decisions. Because when you're looking at the profitability of a huge contract versus a small contract, and you're trying to do the math of, I made $10,000 of profit on this contract that's really, really large versus I made $1,000 of profit on a smaller contract, which one is actually more profitable? And what we found is when we started really looking at this as labor-loaded gross margin, the contracts that we thought were the most profitable because they were big, as you would expect, we found that they weren't near as profitable as we thought. And the thing that people would have, the tendency that people have is, as you're seeing these big numbers, oh, well, they pay us so much money, we'll just include that. I know it's not covered under the agreement, but we're going to just throw that in for them. Go ahead and don't worry about that workstation. Don't worry about that extra service call or that extra thing that's outside of the contract. They pay us so much money. We found that actually our largest contracts were in the bottom quartile of all of our contracts, and so we really started to focus on that to where it doesn't matter how big it is if it's not profitable. And labor loaded gross margin gives you that ability to do that.
You know, it's kind of the same, Dan, as if we say, you know what, I want to be a $10 million business. But we don't talk about what we want our net profit to be on the bottom line, right? So,
right.
You know, without knowing all the details, we make poor decisions, like you said.
You're right. And you know, and that ties into kind of some of those operational aspects of how you're running your businesses can be a little bit different. For us, utilization by member is really important. And it's funny because a lot of people say, wait a minute, you're running an MSP business, and why does the utilization matter? All your agreements are paid. It's almost everything is all you can eat contracts, and your people are getting paid whether they're working or not. Why does that matter? And for us, it really goes into the most important aspect of accurate time tracking and accurate tracking of what's being done. And so for us, that lack of time tracking, the lack of taking notes properly, of entering time as you're going, is really, we say it's that MSP kryptonite. That kills more companies than anything else that we've worked with. And so in one sense, even though we're not paying people by their utilization, we're tracking everybody by their individual utilization and then tying those against what their utilization goals are. So here as an example is a sample of kind of how we have different goals for different people, and those goals are all at their zero line, and what we really care about is, are they putting their time in? Because really everybody should be able to meet their goals because everything is, quote, billable, even though the contracts are paying for it. So if they're not putting their time in, then they're not showing up as being that proper billable resource. And I think it's pretty obvious that nobody likes to see their name in red below the line. And so, this is one of those things that we have from a public standpoint as well as on an individual basis. People want to be above the line. They want to be exceeding their goals, even if it's something as small as making sure that they're tracking their time accurately, they're doing enough work that's customer facing, so it's counted as that customer facing goal, and we're maintaining the profitability of those contracts. So you see that those really start to tie together, of the profitability ties right into the utilization, because the more that they're utilized, or they're putting more time against a contract, against an agreement, then it's going to lower what that effective rate, or it's going to lower that labor loaded gross margin because there's more time, more cost of labor against the agreement. But at the same time, it's going to affect other aspects as well. So each of these are really tied together.
Absolutely. So Dan, one thing I wanted to point on that is I can tell you firsthand how many conversations I've had with engineers or other employees over the years, and we're on different pages. They think they're doing a stellar job, and the data and the details I'm looking at tell me otherwise. So I think you can agree, by putting those visualizations in front of them, it allows everybody to be on the same page and allows everybody to be speaking the same language, but that peer pressure really can help drive better performance.
Absolutely.
And I know one of the areas that a lot of people struggle with, and you've actually done a really good job, and I've learned a lot from you, and we've kind of tweaked our own, but getting people to enter their time on a regular basis. So many partners that I talk to all the time are like, what is the trick? What is the magic wand to get people to enter their time accurately? Because we know that if they wait a week to enter their time, how accurate is that information?
Yeah, and the information's not right. So it's not just about tracking the time, but it's having access to that information of the engineer who was on site or working for a customer goes home. The customer calls back. What did he do? Well, he hadn't gotten around to putting his time in yet. And for us, I will mention one of our little tweaks that we had in our compensation plan for our engineers is also pretty simple. And that is that we do a quarterly performance compensation, and you have to be above the line. So your name has to be in green for you to be eligible for that quarterly compensation. That can be a significant dollar amount, and so we found that to be a very motivational factor, because people realize, if they're below the line for whatever reason, they better get their name above the line for them to be eligible for their compensation. Um, the third element that we want to talk about is the actual customer satisfaction. And this is a real bugaboo for many people. It's been a very difficult thing. I think probably almost every customer that we talk to, every ConnectSMART customer and every MSP has had an issue in really getting the customer satisfaction responses. What is, how satisfied are those customers? And one of the things that we've found, we've kind of gleaned from several different people and how we've sent out our surveys, what we've done with them, and we found that for us, one of those really important things is that visibility and the engagement all the way through. So where we have our engineers being engaged in what that feedback is and teaching them how to ask for feedback from a customer, they have that link on the close of every single ticket where they can fill out that survey and how important that is. Not the please give us 5 stars, but we want the honest feedback. And so there's a couple of different games that we've run in our engineering department of really getting those survey feedbacks, not based on the scores of them, but just the return numbers that we've gotten. And so we have continued to, since we first ran our the first game probably 3 years ago, a really high number of survey responses. And the other thing that we started doing is the integration of the responses. And I wrote a white paper a while back. You can contact us for some more information on it. That really kind of goes into detail on this process of the customer satisfaction and then the customer satisfaction follow-up. And this was so important for us that we created a couple different gadgets to help us to be able to see not only what the survey scores were, but then to have another gadget that was to show us any survey that we had gotten back from a customer that was less than 100% or it had a comment. So every single thing that a customer may have given us less than 100, they made a comment of good, bad, or indifferent, whatever it was, where we would then go and execute another follow-up against that survey to make sure that we've communicated with the customer, we've documented the interaction with the customer, the resolution notes if the customer was unhappy, so that every single one of those surveys gets an additional follow-up. And we found that as well was just amazing at how much that has increased our customer satisfaction and has increased that additional visibility for everybody and how much, how many more surveys that people are filling out. Shane, you're really low volume there.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
All right. For us, that's really important because when we were a break-fix environment, we were always going on site, right? We were always in front of the client. We were able to get the pulse of that client on a regular basis. As soon as we switched to the whole managed service piece and we were doing a lot of stuff remotely, we lost some of that touch. And so, we had a lot of customers that were used to that on-site presence, and so we had to learn ways to provide a very similar level of value to them when we were doing stuff remotely, and be able to get a pulse on that and to know what the clients like, don't like, or want to see more of has allowed us to really grow and still provide that stellar service that our clients are looking for.
Absolutely.
And one of the many ways that we accomplish that is through SLAs, right, Dan?
Absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about how this works at ARRC and CharTec?
So for us, SLA compliance is very important for us. We want to make sure that we're servicing our clients on a very regular basis and that we're meeting or exceeding their expectations as far as levels of service. And of course, there is challenges in getting the clients to understand what the difference between a priority 1 emergency is and a priority 3 ticket, for example. So that's more of an educational piece. But as long as we have those metrics in place and as long as we can report on those accurately and we're utilizing those priorities right, utilizing the ConnectSMART gadgets, you can get that quick visualization into how you're performing and what you're doing well. For us, we grade our service coordinators on the point of when the ticket comes in to the point of when they schedule it for a resource. When they assign a resource, schedule it, whatever that process looks like. Then from there, we grade the engineer on how long it takes them to grab it from the dispatcher or the service coordinator. And then, of course, until resolution. Now, one thing that, Dan, you've taught me is make sure that that the only place they can do time entries is on the in progress or whatever that status is. And the reason that we want to make sure we do that is to force our engineers to follow the process to its entirety. If we don't force them to do that, then something goes from an assigned to a waiting, then maybe to a completed, and we never hit all the different marks that we need to ensure compliance. So that's one of the many things that we need to do, is to make sure that our process and our policy allows us to properly utilize the SLA compliance. But it's also important that we review the data, that we understand where our challenges are and what we need to do better of.
Yeah, and and I think that's a huge key. The first time when we typically install ConnectSMART with a customer, if we're being involved with it, I usually tell them, now, when we first get this up and going, and let's look at your SLAs, let's look at your response time, let's look at your resolution time, let's look at your res plan time, and trust me, I know that this is going to look really, really bad, and you're initially going to think that either you guys are a complete waste or we're lying. The product doesn't work because there's no way these numbers could be correct because we're not in business. We wouldn't be in business if we were this terrible, and that's true. But what we find is it kind of ties back into our engineers tracking their time accurately and timely, because if they didn't put their time entry in and update the service status when they pulled that ticket, then it's not going to be, the customer may know that they had a communication with them. They may not be upset, but the system can't prove it. And that's really where you start to get the process is driving the gadgets, and the gadgets are driving the process. It's that togetherness of defining a process, having a way for people to be able to follow that process, and then the ability to see when that process goes off track. And I think that's really important. And I think it's very important for managers and owners to understand really the proper use of a dashboarding tool like ConnectSMART of these metrics, because typically what it gets seen as is a way to, kind of beat the engineers and hold them accountable to something, as opposed to that tool that helps them see, oh, hey guys, something went off the rails. We either missed a ticket or something got lost. Did it get stuck on the wrong service board? Somebody didn't update it properly. Something happened to make this gadget go red. We better deal with that and make sure that we've updated the ticket appropriately so that all of our numbers are going to look good and our customers are going to be happy. So they really do tie directly together.
And a lot of times the managers are so in the trenches that you're only seeing what's directly in front of you. So having the visualization, having the gadgets, the dashboards, the analytics to tell you the bigger picture kind of forces you to get out of the trenches for a minute and to look at the bigger picture of what's going on and what changes you need to make to ensure that you're getting in front of those issues before the client has an issue. I don't know about you, Dan, but if I can get in front of a client when it's a small issue, when it's something very minor, or even before they even know about it, it's a much better conversation than after the fact or after a major disaster has happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really brings us to our fifth item, which is the exception management. It's not really an individual metric, but it's kind of a grouping of numbers, and it's really just a way of thinking. And this is really one of the keys, I think, behind ConnectSMART that is really unique, and I think is exactly what Shane was talking about, where it's bringing you out of the trenches. It's the, hey, wait a minute, something went wrong. Shane, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you guys see exception management?
So anytime I'm writing a process, anytime I'm looking at different ways that we need to get data out of the system, I'm always trying to think of it in the whole managed by exception. That's something that, Dan, you've embedded in me for as long as I've known you, and it's something that I've lived, I've made it my motto to live by, because there's so much data. How do we know everything that's going on? And I talk to so many partners all the time, and they get so overwhelmed with everything that's going on. Their first question to me is, what should I be looking for? Well, obviously that's a very broad question. My response typically is something around the lines of, well, we need to look at, what is the exception? What could go wrong? What are the things, if you look at 10 different items, what are those things that could go wrong with those 10 items, and how can we report it and look at those metrics? And to give you a few examples, for us, we look at things such as, say we have an agreement, and somebody forgets to put a quantity on that addition item. So I don't know about you guys, but every math education I've ever taken, 0 times whatever is still 0. And so we would find that we had a few agreements that weren't showing the proper value, and I couldn't figure out why until I dove into it deeper, and I found that they just unfortunately tabbed one too many times and didn't put that quantity in there. Another thing could be, I don't care how many service tickets are on the board, but how many tickets, as the gadget says up on the screen, how many tickets are missing, the data? How many are missing the site name or the service type or the contact, email address, all that fun stuff, right? So we want to look at all those different pieces and how can we run our business effectively by looking at all those different avenues. So I don't care how many tickets are in the system. I don't care how many invoices I have in the tank. I want to know XYZ because that's typically an exception for me. Another example for us is around our financial system. One of the things we utilize quite a bit is the developer edition. I've written a lot of custom SQL queries for our accounting system because it's a SQL backend database as well. And that's a lot of what we look for there is I want to look at all the different aspects and where they fit into what bucket they're in, if you will, so I can make sure that, hey, hold on, why do we have all these items that are sitting here pending closing but they're not closed yet? That's a major issue. That's money sitting on the books waiting to be booked.
Yeah, and people ask me, hey, you're always talking about exceptions, and what are the exceptions that we should be looking at? And it's kind of a difficult question because, I've created hundreds of different exception gadgets, and it's something that changes on a regular basis. And I think the best answer to, what are the exceptions that I should be looking at is what are the things that happen in your business that are going to cause you time. They're going to cause that complaint from the customer. That customer is going to call and say, hey, I put this ticket in and it was never emailed to me, and you end up going in there and you look at it and you say, oh, darn, somehow the email address wasn't associated with the ticket, or it had a wrong billing rate, or they got billed for something that should have been against an agreement. Any of those instances that are going to raise a problem that I have to deal with, the way that I want to deal with those cracks in a process where we couldn't foresee it and something just kind of fell off the rails, I want to create an exception for that and now give somebody a number that they can deal with. And it really gives them again that tool to where it's in this case 31 tickets missing data. We've defined for us if it's missing a telephone number, email address, type, subtype, site name, all those different things, agreement, that's missing data. And so it's not just showing you the information, but then double-clicking on it, drilling down into it, and really being able to dig into all of that detail to then, take you full step right through from the exception into, into the PSA system, into ConnectWise, into, into LabTech, Kaseya. And that really is what ConnectSMART is all about, is all this system, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not inventing something that doesn't exist somewhere that you can't, export it into an Excel spreadsheet or go to a particular place in the system to see something. What we're really doing is we're taking all that siloed data, something that you've got in your PSA system, something you've got in your RMM system. Maybe it's, your VIP customers that have hard drive alerts or are offline, and you want to know your priority one tickets for maybe that one really big customer or any ticket that comes in from a particular person. All of those things that you can put together and pull them out of a system where you're not reporting on it, but in live, being able to see that information in front of you. And we have that. We really believe strongly and have it in different views. So, the ownership has a view of what they care about. We have different dashboards throughout the offices when you come in, what applies to everybody as a whole. You'll see the same thing if you walk through ARRC. I don't know how many they're up to now, 30 or 40 some odd different monitors that are displaying the relevant information that's relevant to the people who need to do, really do work. And not just to show them the information, but then give them that ability to double-click and actually go deal with it, go drill down into it, go deal with that priority one ticket, connect back into your ConnectWise system, go ahead and drive your process. And so it's not just a visualization of showing you where something went wrong or showing you where something was good, but it's giving you that tool to be able to perform action, to implement your process. And that for us is what is really, really important about any dashboarding tool, about why we created ConnectSMART to be that tool that is that living and real-time dashboard, cutting across all those different systems. And as Shane said, that capability to tie into really anything, the same way that he's got stuff into ConnectWise and LabTech and into his financial system. It was one financial system, upgraded to another financial system, so he tweaked that to, again, to be able to flow with his business, with the back-end pieces changing, but he has the same operational aspects from the ConnectSMART dashboard tool.
Yeah, and absolutely. The one thing we look at is not only is it from a team perspective or as an entire company perspective, right, Dan, but we also want to be able to give the individual their own, hey, go look at my tickets, go look at, my exceptions. And, I'm a big fan in that whole mentality of also measure to zero, right?
Absolutely.
Is have that dashboard that you want to be able to have, hey, these 15 things right here on the dashboard, they should always be zero or as close to zero as possible. For us, our service coordinators, we want to be able to give them a visualization. Hey, these things waiting on parts, need scheduling, any of those types of items, we want to make sure that those are all front and center with them so they know, hey, before you leave every day, those things need to be addressed so we can make sure that we're set up for the next day.
Yeah, and that really is important. I started to hit that and kind of lost that, but it does go all the way to the individual. So it's not that viewpoint of a manager looking down on them, but the manager is giving them the tools, and it's kind of that supporting. And we've used that to to an extreme in our own NOC area, where we have a gadget for each individual. What's the ticket that they're currently working on? What's the ticket they're next going to be working on? So you're not having to go, hey, are you working on this ticket? I saw it come in. What's the status of it? You can see it right on their dashboard. What ticket are they working on? How long has it been since their last time entry? Like I said, what's the next ticket? Anything that's a priority ticket that needs to to be recycled, moved around. It's their tools to be able to perform their own work instead of getting lost in the tools that they have, to just make it as easy as possible for them to be able to do their job. So that's really the whole idea behind ConnectSMART. What it's about, those individual metrics, really a modular system for you to be able to pick and choose the things that apply to you and apply to the individual, apply to the particular business unit, or apply to your business, and to leverage the experience of some of those best practices and metrics and managing by exception, and be able to leverage those in your own business.
Absolutely. And Dan, one thing I want to make sure, you've got it up here on the screen, I want to point out, one of the things I encourage people all the time, look, whenever you're going to roll something new out, you need to do it in a test environment. You need to play with the data. You need to understand the data, and you need to understand how the data is being gathered so that you can make sure you have accurate data. So many times I see partners that roll these things out, and I've even been guilty of myself back in the day. You roll these things out, and all of a sudden the data is not completely correct, or something's off because of certain metrics or whatever the case is, or you can't explain the data to the team, and all of a sudden they've lost confidence in it. And it's really hard to get the confidence back into the team. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence before you roll it out, and you're not just saying, oh, I got this cool new toy, let me go throw it out to everybody and just tell them to follow along. There's more to it than that.
Absolutely. And we're going to take some questions, if there are any questions, here in a moment. So if you have any questions, go ahead and you can use the GoToWebinar form to go ahead and put in any questions that you might have. I did want to mention, on this operational side, I believe, Shane, you've got an Operations Academy that's coming up for anybody who may not already be aware of it. When is that CharTec Operations Academy? That's October?
It's October 23rd and 24th. And yeah, absolutely. This is going to be all about operations. So our academies, we have them on a regular basis. They're all themed. We do everything from sales and marketing to CEO to operations. You name it, we're covering all those different aspects. And so this operations academy, actually, Tim, Dan, you're going to be there along
Yep.
with Tim Brewer and a few other people. But we're really excited to have all these different people coming out and helping to join us, and helping to educate our partners basically on how to successfully run your business. And Dan, you've been a part of several of these operations academies that we've had, and I think in a combination of all of our everything we've learned over the years, I think we're all able to translate and give our partners a lot of information that they can go back with and make some minor changes sometimes to their business that can have radical results.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, there was a question that came in from from Theo, or a couple who is already a ConnectSMART user. You're looking at here the kind of the latest. We've released 3.10 and 3.11 versions this year. We do have another build coming out in that platform, and that is a part of ConnectSMART, assuming that you're on the the standard ConnectSMART platform, which I think 99.99% of people are. That is a part of what you're eligible for. You can contact our sales, or actually they'll follow back up with you. Looks like either Jen or Kat will follow up with you to make sure that you've got everything you need to have. But this is a part of the standard ConnectSMART. We have some very, very interesting things that are coming up in the next couple months. That'll be going to beta. If anybody is interested in the beta program as well, let us know. There was a question that came in about billable versus non-billable, and about there's differing viewpoints on how people should be tracking them, and I think the best practice that we've seen is everything goes against the agreement. If this is something that's being done for a customer under an agreement, and what determines whether it's billable or non-billable would be the same as if they were on a time and materials basis. So if I'm calling a customer, or one of the engineers is calling a customer and leaves a voice message, that's non-billable. If they call the customer, leave a voice message, and then they write out a detailed instruction, and that goes into their time entry about what they're supposed to do, that would be marked as billable. So for the most part, all time against an agreement is usually going to end up being billable. Some of the exceptions to that would be if I've got somebody shadowing, or two people working on a project, and it's one's there for moral support. Some of their time would be non-billed the same way that it would if it was a T&M material contract or T&M customer. Do you have anything to add to that, Shane?
Yeah, that's something that's very critical, is we got to make sure that you do have those time being billed appropriately. And for us, we actually default our agreements to anything that's in the managed service business unit, that those items are automatically have that agreement assigned. So whenever a technician does enter their time, it's automatically going against the agreement unless they choose for it not to be. So the more that you can automate and allow the system to do those things for you, so the technicians only have to do 1 or 2 things as opposed to 5 or 10, the more accurate the results you're going to get as well.
Absolutely. So there was also the question, yes, this was recorded. You'll be able to watch it later. Also be able to get a copy of these slides if you would like. That's not a problem at all. There was another question that came from the utilization. What are the common utilization percentages that we expect from the various roles and titles in our operation? That is a really good question, and each organization is different, but I would say for us on the MSP side of the business, that CIO should be about 60% billable doing his CIO role, which is directly customer facing. Service manager should be 50% billable. All engineers should be 76.5% billable. Those are the different numbers that we look at for our productive roles as far as their baselines for compensation, and again, making sure that they're really tracking their time. In reality, they're usually higher than that, but those are our baselines. There was another question about how we can monitor client-specific information, and like monitoring SQL for a client and alerting them. There's actually several different things that you can do there, and different customers have done this in different ways. For some of our larger, like as the MSP, some of our larger customers, we've actually put ConnectSMART at their facility as well. We have some medical facilities. We have actually some of our other ConnectSMART customers have done the same, as far as kind of like the downstream IT idea with or whatever ConnectWise calls that now. I don't think it's downstream, but the managed IT process.
Streamline IT.
Streamline IT. Thank you, Shane. I was struggling there for a minute. We've done the same for our customers. So where they want to be able to see a certain information about SQL, or a priority 1 tickets that they have submitted, or what is our response time to their tickets that they're submitting from their help desk to ours, those kinds of things. We actually have created gadgets for them and actually deploy them right down to their desktops the same way as if they were in our office. So we put it on desktops, put it up on their own dashboards, and we'd be happy to talk with you a little bit more for that. Let's see here, and there was a question as well about getting a copy of the white paper, and that is on our blog site. If you go to www.connectsmart.com and you look at the blog, you'll see the introduction to the these 5 metrics, and there's a download right there for that white paper where you can get that. You also can send an email to info@connectsmart.com, and we'll be happy to help you there as well. All right. Well, I think that we have probably taken care of all these. If you have any additional questions, I know there was also a couple people who needed some direct support. We will go ahead and follow up with you on that. Jen, who is messaging, she's going to go ahead and respond to that as well for some of those direct requests for some custom work that you'd like to have done or helped with. We can help you with that. We do offer those consulting services as well as the product by itself. And wanted to thank everybody. Wanted to particularly thank Shane for joining me today and sharing some of his experiences with ConnectSMART and some of his knowledge of the industry and kind of how you've leveraged ConnectSMART in your organization. And anyone who would feel free to contact us, we'll reach out to you to see if you have any additional questions or anything that we can help you with. But we want to thank you very much and hope you all have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
All right. Have a good one.